Gill, you, how are you, pal? Happy Monday to you. Is this weird for you being on the other side of this?
I've done it a couple times before, but it's nice. It's nice to hear you fire the questions my way instead of being inside that room with you.
Well,
I'd like to hear you on this side.
There's so many places that we could launch off to, based on what Doug said today, based on what Doug said yesterday. You've probably been hearing Scott and I go back and forth on some of the head-scratching decisions. Where would you like to begin, sir?
Oh, boy, today was really out there, man. I mean, the whole notion that he didn't have Ryan Matthews on the field because they weren't going to run, because there was no way they were getting a yard. And I've said many times over the years, not just this year, but over years, where Andy wouldn't run the ball. And times where you just don't run the ball in spots where you really think you should, that if you're a good team and you can't get 1 yard on the ground, you're not a good team. The good teams get that yard the way they want to get the yard, not the way they think the other team will give them that yard. And that's just a sign that this team doesn't think they're very good. And that was the mentality that Doug had on the play. You're running the ball all over that team yesterday. Have you ever seen a situation where you actually average more yards per run than you do per pass? I don't know that it's ever happened ever. Yeah. And yet yesterday that happened, and yet he chose to throw the ball. What he said today was just I don't know how he even came up with that answer and justified it, but that's what he said. They couldn't get. In fact, he said we would have lost a yard on that play. Well, now you're telling us you're not very good.
How about where he says that our analytical team goes through that information, they crunch the numbers? What analytical team? Like, what is he talking about?
Right, like yesterday, it wasn't in their favor to go to overtime, and I don't have a problem with them going for it. Look, they've been aggressive. They're not making the playoffs. You want to get the win, go for it, no problem. The play call, not the best in the world, but his answer is ridiculous, that if they go to overtime, the percentages aren't in their favor to win the game. Well, guess what? When you flip the coin, it's 50-50. If you get the ball first, guess who the percentages are in their favor? Yours. So it doesn't make any sense how he's trying to justify some of these things. And it doesn't help do any favors for him. Now, according to some reports that I saw yesterday, the Eagles aren't going to make any drastic changes. They kind of figured that this season was going to be a down year anyway. But, man, the optics of some of the things he says, you were in that room yesterday, Scott. People ought to be looking at each other like, really? Is this what he really said?
Yeah, you kind of got that feeling. Like after some of the stuff he said, you kind of did the peripheral vision kind of thing where you don't move your head but look around like, is everybody else about to fall out of their seat like I am? Yeah, it was rough. And, but I know the report you're talking about from, I think it was the NFL Network, that came out before the game. Now, Jeffrey Lurie was definitely upset after this game, and I saw him. And Brian Dawkins having a conversation with Brandon Graham, and it just makes me think that maybe Jeffrey's starting to get upset enough that he's going to kick the tires on a few things. And it made me wonder, because as I was down there, you hear the rumblings in Baltimore that, they're not happy with Harbaugh. If John Harbaugh became available, I got to think Jeffrey Lurie takes a look.
Somebody tweeted something at me yesterday when I put that article up on our website about the Rappaport report. And the answer he gave was kind of interesting. Like, are you just wasting your time bringing Doug back next year? In other words, if you're Jeff Lurie, really believe that this guy is the guy? And if you don't, are you wasting another year by bringing him back? And then in turn, you're kind of wasting the development of your quarterback. If you're going to keep him sticking around with this guy only to get rid of him down the road, if you don't believe in him, you got to make this decision that's in the best interest of your quarterback at this stage. They're not a team that's searching for their quarterback. They're a team that has their quarterback. They have to start thinking in that manner. Who is the best guy to take us with this quarterback? What's the most important pairing? Coach and quarterback. You think you have your quarterback, you better know you have your coach before you waste another year.
So let's talk about Jordan Hicks, okay, he caught as many passes in that game as Ryan Matthews, Brent Selleck, Nelson Aguilar, and Dorial Green-Beckham. And the fourth down play call, the 4th and 2 is a jet sweep to Nelson Aguilar.
Horrible.
Right. So
horrible call on that. You got Ryan Matthews running all over. He had 128 yards. He's averaging 4.9 yards a pop. And you give it to the least dependable player you got on the whole roster on a 4th down play. It's just inexcusable. I tweeted at one point that Hicks is the best receiver they got. He's got the best hands. He had the best yards after the catch. He was the fastest one of they had. I mean, literally, they should be playing him as a 4th tight end the way he caught that ball and took off. Hicks to me is one piece on that defense that you have. I mean, if Chip Kelly didn't get anything right, the one guy that everybody thought he got wrong was the only guy he seems to get right. So he's a building block, and he's a leader. The way he talks after the game, I mean, he's very composed. He's a guy that you should be excited about, and that's what you're looking at. Doug was asked today, you said once you're eliminated, you're going to play some of the young guys. He said, who else do you want to see? I mean, he's right to some extent. They have been playing a lot of young players, but you got to start looking to find the building blocks of this team, and Jordan Hicks is definitely one of them. But, the throw to Aguilar, it's low, but he drops it. I mean, an NFL receiver has to make a couple tough catches throughout the course of a year.
Got to make the easy ones. He dropped one that hit him right in the hands, and then when he was standing up in its stride.
I don't. To me, I went off on this last week, guys. Pete, you were there with the whole, and I think Seth Joyner addressed this on the post game yesterday. With, is it the lack of talent at wide receiver, or is the scheme just not put together right for the guys they have? And I would say, look, they don't have top-end wide receiver talent. That we know. But for the guys you do have, I don't think he's putting them in very good positions to be successful. And you can't run 12-yard outs and curls the whole game. I mean, that's it. The defense just sits there waiting for you underneath. You can't average 4.4 yards a catch. It's almost impossible. Jordan Matthews had 6 catches for 27 yards. How is that even possible?
Yeah, and he referenced that today. He was asked about one play of 30-plus yards in the last couple of weeks, Paul Turner's 46-yard catch, and he tried to break through it, but then at the end, he went right back into Doug Clueless speak where he says, I don't mind throwing a slant and then letting the guy run for another 25 yards. We'll evaluate it at the end of the season, though. How about you evaluate it now?
Well, you know what? He ran the slant one time to Dorial Green-Beckham. Beckham caught the ball, and it was a good gain. I think it was 11 or 12 yards. It was about the only time. Look, and those slants aren't going to hit for home runs every single time. But there was games where Dorial Green-Beckham had caught the slant, made a couple plays, and they never go back to him. He caught the slant yesterday, they never went back to him. I talked about Treggs last week. You see all these guys around the league who are small, undersized receivers, and they have one quality, quickness and speed. They have no plays where they try to get the fastest guy on the field the ball. You mentioned the one guy who had 30 yards on a play. He wasn't active yesterday. Not to say that Paul Turner is anything special, certainly not saying that, but the guys that you do have, I thought the game plan and the play calling yesterday was so erratic. I was like, what is this guy doing? It almost seems like he's like playing Madden football, and it's like, oh, this looks like a neat play. Let me try that one.
Hey, Mike, I kept thinking about this after the game and on my drive back from Baltimore. You look at this roster, you look at the guys that are there not making plays. You look at this receiving core, you look at the secondary, particularly the corners. Then you look at guys like Connor Barwin, who's got a few years left on his contract, but he doesn't really have much of a cap hit to get rid of. Do you see there being, and I'm not saying maybe he will be or he won't be, but do you see a lot of shakeup in this roster in the offseason?
It's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day because I sent a number to Pete today. I saw this. The ESPN sends us notes, every day. One of them was the amount of money the Eagles spent in the offseason. Top 5 in the league. The other teams in that list, Jacksonville,
Denver,
New Orleans, Denver and the Eagles and the Giants. Of that team that spent all the money, the Giants are the only one that are going to the playoffs, it looks like. So spending money in free agency is obviously not the remedy. You got to go through the draft. Now, what Howie did this offseason was he targeted his own players and locked them up. Ertz and Curry and Graham. I mean, he gave all those guys big money. So what now he has to do is start to identify the next step. Who should not be here any longer? And you got to start to pair off those guys, the Barwins, guys who are getting paid a lot of money and are on the downside of their careers, much like they did in the Andy era. When you were up 30 years old, that was it. You were done. And I think you're going to have to start, Ryan Matthews. I would assume that he's a guy that's going to be gone. You got to start looking at the Nolan Carrolls, guys like that who are, mid-level players. They're going to have a lot of cap guys that they paid money to. Barwin, they paid money to, that they're going to have to make tough decisions on whether or not they want to move on, and just to, start to move on from some of the veterans on the team who obviously, I think this team is filled with a lot of average to good players, but not a lot of great ones.
We had so much to talk about, Mike Gill, that was all Eagles, and we basically filled up the whole segment talking about Eagles. But if I didn't say Sixers to you, I'd be remiss, because what a weekend they had and what a game they had. And, of course, news coming out today. The Nerlens Noel situation. We'll just close on that and let you discuss what your thoughts are on the Sixers.
Well, apparently Colangelo spoke at the same time Pederson did, which probably got swept under the radar a little bit there. But he spoke to the media with the Sixers and basically said, look, we're not going to be pressured. We don't have to trade this guy. To me, I think it's a crime that they would not play Nerlens Noel and Joel Embiid together. I don't understand how they're committed to try and Okafor and Embiid, but not to say, hey, we want to see Embiid and Noel. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if you remember when Chris Mannix was on, and he said, don't be surprised if the Sixers try to showcase one of the guys for an extended period of time and to do the same thing with the other guy. So maybe this is them saying, Jaleel, you're getting a month. Nerlens, you're getting a month. Go out there before the trade deadline and may the best man be traded. We'll see. But to me, to not play him as part of your regular rotation, I mean, come on. Seriously, he's not one of your best 7, 8 guys, 10 guys, whatever, to get even 14 to 20 minutes to play defense here and there. That just doesn't make any sense. So, I've been very supportive of what the Sixers have done, but when they need to be criticized, this is a move that I think they need to be criticized for, because Nerlens Noel certainly deserves to be out on that floor.
Well, Nerlens Noel didn't pop off last night. He popped off the night before when he only played 8 minutes. But last night he said all the right things after the game, just like Mike Gill says all the right things on this radio program, usually from 2 to 6. But today he was our guest on the show. Gilly, stay in touch, as I know you will. And Scott and I appreciate your time.
Got to get back to my yoga.
Yes, hot stone yoga. Take care, buddy.